Let's talk about access management. How do we manage access to our clusters, to our servers, to our databases, and so on and so forth? How do you manage access to your applications and third-party applications that are meant for internal use? One possible solution could be Teleport. So let's take a look at how it works, what it does, whether we should use it, and so on and so forth. So, what is Teleport? One possible explanation or description would be that it is a single sign-on solution that provides one place to access SSH servers, Kubernetes, databases, desktops, web applications, and so on and so forth. It enables us to define access policies for our infrastructure and for our applications. And it also allows us to share and record interactive sessions in one or two or many or all environments. In other words, it is a potential one-stop solution for all access authentication needs we might have, at least when internal usage is in question. That was enough talk. Let's jump straight into taking a look at how it works. We will start by exploring Teleport in Kubernetes clusters. And to do that, first you need to register in Teleport. I will assume that you did that. It's easy. And once you register, you will get an address through which you can access your Teleport dashboard. So I will output mine to the screen and then open it in a browser. So to sign in into Teleport, you need to type your username and your password. You know what those are, assuming that you're registered. And then we need to provide the authenticator code. I will do that with my mobile. So let me see. Here we go. That's the number. Type it and click the button. And then we're in. Right now I'm interested in Kubernetes. So let me go to the Kubernetes section and try to add the Kubernetes cluster. Now, unfortunately, there is no button with instructions. There is a button that takes you to documentation, which is, it's okay. It's not the best I've seen, but hey, doable. It would be nice if there is a button here that I can just copy and paste the commands, but there isn't. So instead of you watching me go through all the documentation, I will just skip that part. I already did it and go straight to my terminal and install the agent inside my Kubernetes cluster. Through that agent, I will be able to provide authentication to me, to my users, and so on and so forth. You will see it in action in a second, but let me install the agent first. So the command is, typical Helm command, Helm upgrade install, and then the name of whatever you're installing, which in this case is Teleport Cube Agent. The chart that we want to install, the namespace. Yes, I want to create a namespace and I will provide some values through values YAML file. There is nothing special about it. You can see it because all the code, all the manifests are in a repo, and the reference to the repo and all the commands is in a gist. So check out the gist. It's in the description of this video. And then I wait and wait and wait, and there we go. It's up and running. Now, Teleport comes with a CLI, actually two CLIs, which is a bit confusing. One of those is TSH, which we can use to list all the Kubernetes clusters that have authentication managed through Teleport. Right now, I have only one cluster. What can I say? I'm a poor person. I cannot afford many clusters, at least not for this demo, but one cluster will be enough to demonstrate how it works. Now, adding the agent is not very useful. We need to create some roles and we need to add some users, and then we will have a cluster where we control who can access, who can do what, and so on and so forth. So let me create a role first specific for Kubernetes clusters, and then we are going to play around with users. So I will go to the team section and then roles, and over there I'm going to create a new role for this and all other clusters that I might add in the future. Now we have sample YAML for creating manifests, And this is a bit confusing with teleport. If I'm using WebUI, I probably do not want to work on a YAML level. And if I do want to work on a YAML level by defining things as YAML, I will probably not use WebUI. I mean, I personally prefer YAML. I prefer not using WebUI. I like using terminals. But I understand that some people like WebUIs, and those who like WebUIs, they like clicking buttons instead of writing YAML over there. So it's a bit confusing, this mixture of WebUI and a big chunk of YAML code in there. But maybe it's only me, right? Maybe that's what people like these days. I do not know. Anyways, ignore that. What does matter is that I will change the name of this role, and I will add a couple of Kubernetes groups that will have access through this role, or to be more precise, which Kubernetes groups or access controls or role bindings and roles and so on and so forth. I'm going off the rails. Now, what does matter is that I'm defining Kubernetes groups that will be personated by the user that belongs to this role. I'm defining through labels which types of resources can be accessed by this role. And I'm defining which users will be able or will be impersonated by this role. I will not go into details of what all this means. It will take a while. Go and check out the documentation. What does matter really for this demo is that you can fine-tune what a role can or cannot do and so on and so forth. There's a lot of flexibility, really a lot of flexibility and a lot of permutations that you can do, so I wouldn't really worry about it. For now, you will check it in docs. What matters is that you can really define, fine-tune what a role is. Next, I need to add the user, and then we're done more or less. So I will go to the user section, create a new user. I will call that user JDoe and give him Kubernetes admin permissions. I will elevate that person, that imaginary person, to be administrator of this cluster. That's how generous I am today. And then, and this is now important, I got a link. This is the link through which that person can register and log in Teleport so that he can start using the authentications and the permissions that I gave to that user. So all I have to do as an, let's say, admin is send this person the link. Everything else is being taken care of by Teleport. So let me simulate that user by switching to a different computer. Give me a second. Here I go. Wait. Okay. Here we are, different computer, and I'm going to do the rest or the next few steps from here, simulating that I am that person, that I'm JDoe. So here it is. I'm a different person right now, and I see welcome to Teleport. Okay, yes, I want to get started. I am excited. Let's see whether I can access the cluster that the other me created, and I need to specify the username and the password, and then I need to register myself for authentication, which I will do through my mobile. Let's see. I open my Google Authenticator. I scan the barcode. I get the code. Brilliant. And I type it in. And look at that, if I go to the Kubernetes section, I see my cluster, which is his cluster, and because he gave me permissions to connect to it, to be admin of that cluster, and all I have to do is click that connect button from my own machine, and I should be able to authenticate and do whatever the permissions allow me to do inside that cluster. So let me do that quickly. I copy the first command, tsh login, go to my terminal, execute it, answer a few questions, namely what's my user and what's my token, you know, the one from my mobile. So let's take a look. Okay, there we go. And the second and the only really important command here is to log in to my cluster using tsh, and from there on my kubeconfig will have permissions to access that cluster. Now bear in mind that those are temporary permissions, temporary credentials. I would need to refresh that every once in a while for security reasons, so that kubeconfig that will be generated will not be here forever, only temporary. I mean, it will be here forever, but it will not be able to access the cluster forever. So let me log in, which effectively changes my current context, and then I should be able to access my cluster. So let's see whether it works. If I do kubectl get nodes, there we go, 3 nodes, brilliant. I can access the cluster, I can list the nodes. Let's see a few other things. For example, can I list the namespaces? Yeah, I can. I got permissions by other me to list the namespaces. Can I list all the pods in a cluster? Of course I can, because Victor gave me admin permissions. He is very generous today. Now, this was absolutely fantastic. I can finally manage access to all my Kubernetes clusters without me really being tied to specific distribution, because some distributions already give you access, but I want a unified access across all the clusters, different platforms, different providers. But it shouldn't be limited only to Kubernetes. That would be too easy, right? I would like to have the same authentication principles, single sign-on, and so on and so forth with other stuff. So let's try some third-party application. Let's see whether I can use teleport to authenticate to, let's say, Prometheus, or to deny access to Prometheus to everybody except those who are authenticated. So let's take a look at how we can switch from Kubernetes to applications, in this case, third-party applications. Now I'm back to being me, the original me, the one with supersonic access, the one that is administrator of the dashboard in Teleport itself. Anyways, what I will do is install Prometheus first. It's nothing special, nothing to do with Teleport, just a plain old Helm install, upgrade, Prometheus, this and that. You know the drill, right? Just installing Prometheus. There is nothing special about that yet. Now, the interesting thing about Prometheus is that it has no authentication mechanism, and I can prove that by listing all the services and all the ingresses. So you will notice two things over here. First of all the services are cluster IP. None of them is not port or load balancer, so they are not accessible from outside. And since there is no ingress, that's doubly true, right? Now, I could have set up ingress for Prometheus, but that wouldn't be very wise, because if I set up ingress for Prometheus, that would be accessible indeed from people outside that cluster, but it would be accessible to everybody because Prometheus has no authentication and logging mechanism. We cannot sign into Prometheus. We cannot control who can access it and who cannot access it. Now, within your organization, you might say everybody should access Prometheus and then power to you. But in some other cases, you might want to restrict access to it. And that's what we're going to do now. And even if in your case that's not Prometheus, you surely have some other application that should have restricted access. And maybe that access is available to public, and then you doubly need to restrict it. In any case, what matters right now is that Prometheus that I installed in a way that I installed it is not accessible in any form of way except for the processes inside that cluster. And that's what we're going to change right now. But before we do, to be honest, if I have admin permissions to that cluster or sufficient permissions to that cluster, I could execute something like qctl, namespace, port forward, Prometheus, those are the ports, and then I should be able to access Prometheus. So it's not that it's impossible to access it at all without ingress, without node port services, and so on and so forth. We can do port forwarding, but what happens then? Well, take a look. So I open that URL and I'm in Prometheus. Nobody asked me to authenticate and nobody prevented me to access it, which is great for me, but not necessarily for the company. So let's see how we can change that. The first thing I'm going to do is retrieve the cluster IP, the internal IP of Prometheus. I will need that in a second. So export prom address, etc., 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 and I get the IP. And then I'm going to output a different values file that we are going to use so that you take a look at one special thing over there. Let's see what we got. Actually, I'm not going to output it. I'm going to change the cluster IP, insert here entry in that YAML file with whatever the address is straight away. I like sed, so let's modify that file, and at the same time you will see it in the output what it really is. So here's what changed compared to what I had before. To begin with, roles in the past were only cube. Now it's cube and up, meaning that this agent should be managing not only access to Kubernetes cluster, but also to applications in that cluster. And since I mentioned applications, there is only one entry in the apps section that says, hey, there's Prometheus, and this is the address, the internal address of that instance. manage it, right? That's one of the applications that you should manage. So all I have to do now is upgrade or update my teleport agent running that cluster by providing it with the new set of values in the values file, and that's about it, right? So Helm upgrade, etc., 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 etc. Then click the enter key and wait, and there we go. And now if I go back to teleport web UI to the applications section, I should see, there we go, there is Prometheus over there and there is launch button. And if I click that button, then I can open Prometheus with access controlled by teleport. And I'm still not forced or obligated to log in. And bear in mind that I'm doing now this from the second computer. Nobody asked me for login, but not because everybody can enter Prometheus from now on, but quite the opposite, because I'm already logged in. This is single sign-on, so as long as I log in into Teleport, I can access anything managed by it directly without any additional authentication, which is absolutely awesome. That's what single sign-on is for, right? I do not need to think about different authentications and so on and so forth. I just go to Teleport, choose the application I want to launch, or choose the cluster I want to access, or choose the database, which I'm not showing you now, that I would need to access, and so on and so forth. Single sign-on, absolutely awesome. Also, by the way, this was HTTPS immediately, automatically, even though Prometheus itself is not having certificates or any of those things, right? So it's encrypted as a side effect of single sign-on. So let's talk about Teleport. Let's see what are the pros and cons. Bear in mind that I did not show you everything that Teleport can do, but everything goes in the same direction. It's relatively simple, straightforward, and you can use it to manage access and sign-on and single sign-on to almost everything. So, Teleport, right? It provides authentication and single sign-on for applications, for servers, for Kubernetes, for databases, for desktops, and a few other things, I think. I did not have time to show all of those, but you should trust me, you can do those things. And depending on the license you have, whether it's free or not free, and so on and so forth, you can do additional things like record sessions, right? So when somebody accesses something, you can record that section automatically, and that's potentially very good because then you can track who did what. But then that sounds scary, right? You can track who does what, but anyways, you can do that as well, and a few other things. Now let's start by talking about, what should we start with? Pricing. Yes, pricing is always important, and the good news is that there is a community edition and there is enterprise edition, and community edition is self-hosted. That's not the one I'm using right now. I'm using Teleport SaaS, but if you want to go for free, you need to self-host it, which gives you more or less the same features, and it's not really complicated, so there is nothing terribly wrong self-hosting it, but that's one of the differences. And in any case, if you use community edition, free edition, you need to self-host it, which is for some companies even a requirement. You get most of the features, they're open source, you get integration with GitHub, and you get community support, meaning that probably, most likely, you go to Slack, you ask questions, and they might be answered. They will be answered. It's very responsive community, so that's a really good thing over there. Or you can go with Enterprise Edition, where you get real support, and you can choose between self-hosted and cloud, and so on and so forth. Explore it on your own, check it out. I always recommend starting for free, and then if you like it, then you go for enterprise because you know what you're buying. So check it out. Now let's talk about pros and cons. What are the good things? What are the bad things? And I like to start with bad things. Let's get that out of the way. And the first thing is docs. Docs are sometimes great, sometimes confusing. Like, depending on which path you take and which platform you choose, you will get full information or part information. They can be a bit confusing, but after a while you get used to it, and then it's, I guess, okay. A few entries missing here and there, but you will survive. Nevertheless, it's not the brightest and the best thing about Teleport, so negative point for documentation. What else? Oh yes, adding applications by modifying Helm values file is a bit clunky and not ideal. What would be ideal if you're using Kubernetes? For non-Kubernetes users, it's a completely different story. But if you are using Kubernetes, then there should be custom resources, right? You should be creating custom resources maybe for each user, maybe for each application. That would mean the teleport guys would need to create custom resource definitions with controllers. And then instead of upgrading the whole setup of the whole agent every time you want to add or modify something, you would be managing each of those components, roles, permissions, and applications, and so on and so forth by adding custom resources. That would be absolutely awesome. And that's how Kubernetes wants us to do things, and for a very good reason. So adding applications through YAML file is a bit clunky, let's say. And the last negative thing is a bit strange choice or strange mixture of web UI combined with YAML. I like YAML, but I suspect that people who want to manage things through YAML, they would probably not use web UI. So it's a bit strange mixture of what is inside of that web UI. But I think that teleport is evolving, so it will probably be better. For those who like to click buttons, they will be buttons probably in the future. I hope so. I'm not one of those, but I recognize there are people like that. Now, none of those negative things is a deal breaker. There is nothing really serious missing or seriously wrong with teleport, so I'm probably finding problems where there are no real problems. So let's jump into pros, into good things. To begin with, it's open source and it's cloud or SaaS and it's enterprise. You can choose the flavor you like the most or the flavor you're comfortable with paying. You can go from anything like free to pay money, a lot of money. So I like options. I like combination of open source so that everybody has access to something, but also enterprise version so that the company that is maintaining that project can feed themselves and get some salary. So it's a healthy balance, I would say, between what is open source and what is enterprise. So big thumbs up on that. It works almost everywhere, right? I use Kubernetes today, but it doesn't have to be Kubernetes. It works almost everywhere. And that's amazing, especially since most of the bigger organizations do not have everything in one place. You have anything from serverless to Kubernetes to legacy to, I don't know, mainframe. So it's really nice that it works almost, not everywhere, but almost everywhere, no matter the platform you're using. And simplicity, yes, it's very simple, yet powerful enough. Access control, for example, can be made to be as simple as you want it or as complicated as you need it to be, depending on your needs. So it's fairly flexible, and I like that part. So all in all, I think it's absolutely awesome. I strongly recommend using Teleport for your authentication needs and single sign-on needs and so on and so forth. It's almost a no-brainer. Try it out. Let me know what you think.